Our family computer used to sit in my mom's room, against the wall next to the door. The light switch was directly to the left. It was a small room, so only about 3 or 4 feet away from the center of the dresser. For background, my mom works on computer hardware and never, ever paints her nails or wears rings as a result. Around this time, our whole family was having severe night terrors almost every night, with a heavy negative energy hanging over the whole house. One day when I was 13, I was at the computer browsing the internet when I felt a strange, checked-out, dreamlike feeling come over me. The state of mind I was in is important to note. It felt like how you feel when you're in front of a computer for 8 hours straight, completely spaced out and disconnected from reality. That's why I didn't move or do anything while observing this whole thing go down. I slowly turned to the cracked open door and was just spaced out staring at it when I saw a hand reach through. Distinctly, I remember bright red nails with stiletto-like shaped acrylics. Basically, the nails were very long and filed to points, as if done at a salon. There were at least 4 gold rings on the fingers and were very elegant. I remember I distantly thought it could have been my grandma, but if she were in the house, she would have made herself known. She's got a loud voice. Plus, she has her own house, so if she came over to visit, it would have been weird as hell to sneak in without making any noise. The hand grasped and fumbled around near the switch, as if it didn't know what it was reaching for, like it had never switched off a light. It was slightly spasming now that I think of it, moving very unnaturally. It only fumbled for maybe 10 seconds, and then flicked off the switch and receded back into the crack of the door. I sat and stared for a few more seconds, thinking that whichever family member was there would greet me after turning the light off. Nothing. After those few seconds, I had a rush of adrenaline and fear, so I ran to turn the light back on, peeked in the hallway, and saw no one. I worked up the courage to check the house, and it turned out I was home alone. No one in my family aside from me wears nail polish and rings, especially not back then. The dreams stopped, and I never saw anything again. I only made the nightmare connection recently when talking to my mom about spirits, and she told me about having to banish and protect our family after this period of extreme nightmares. I realized this happened around the time that I saw the hand. I think that whatever materialized into that hand was causing that heaviness around the house and the horrible dreams. It was very brief and sounds kinda silly, but I'll never forget that strange trance, nor the fear I felt when I realized something unnatural had occurred. So I've been thinking about this for a while. I don't know why it's been bothering me, but maybe if I share it, it'll stop. I live in Japan, but I'm American, so my language skills on both sides aren't too sharp. My spouse is Japanese and we have one child together. We decided the better country to raise him in would be Japan. So once I moved to be with them, we waited a few years before we started to go house hunting. I didn't want to live in the country since that's where I've lived my entire life and hated it. But I also didn't want to live in a big city like Tokyo or Kyoto either. We compromised and decided maybe returning to my husband's hometown would be best. That way my in-laws could be involved with our son. I think everyone was pretty excited with my willingness to be closer to family. We ended up finding a really amazing realtor who was very patient with my American demands. Wide open floor plan. 3 to 4 bedrooms with a living room, dining room, and kitchen. We went to see a couple places. My American mind pre-denying anything where my 5'1" self could jump up and touch the ceiling, or if I could touch both walls with my arms outstretched in a hallway. I know the realtor was exhausted with my demands, but he worked hard and found a brand new development with almost everything I wanted. There were 3 homes he wanted to show us, so we brought our son and my mother-in-law, who helped keep his attention while my husband and I spoke to the realtor. The first home was nice. High ceilings, enough room for our family, but not enough parking. We moved on to the next home, just next door. This place wasn't up to my expectations. It was much smaller than the first, with an awkward layout. While I looked around with my mother-in-law, we heard what sounded like hammering upstairs. She mentioned since it was a new development, the contractors may be finishing up or cleaning. That's when I noticed my son had wandered off. I called out for him, and he runs downstairs screaming for his grandma and pulling her arm with urgency. Before I could tell him to behave, the realtor hears the same hammering sound. My husband asked if the contractors were still here, because we wanted to take a look upstairs. He replied, telling us no. Everything we were looking at today was basically ready to move into. That's when my son started saying, "Crow, crow." Confused, we followed the realtor upstairs and saw that in the main bedroom, several crows had been ramming themselves into the windows. They would perch on the railing of the balcony, fly a short distance, then ram into the window with such force they would fall on the balcony floor and lay there motionless for a moment before attempting to do it again and cawing loudly. Our realtor uneasily ended this home's tour abruptly. As we walked next door, my mother-in-law mentioned how strange it was that the home we saw before, only a few feet away, didn't have the same problem. I dismissed it as maybe the animals aren't used to this building or something, and Japanese crows are pretty annoying and have real personalities. I didn't like that house anyway. The third home felt so heavy as soon as we entered. I tried to ignore it. I enjoyed the dining room. It was just adjacent from the kitchen. It was almost perfect. I could make it work, I knew it. There was even a large backyard for our 2 dogs. The living room was a bit small, but again, I could make it work. No crows upstairs, confirmed by my son and mother-in-law. At that point, I looked out of the window of the living room. I really wish I hadn't. See, my parents and sisters always say we inherited a gift to see things others can't. Throughout my life, I have been through so much therapy and taken so much medication to make the sounds and visions stop. There is no such thing. I was in a very good place at that moment in time, or so I thought. Looking out of the window, there was a small forest, tall trees and grass, but what was out of place was a large man. He was standing there staring back at me. His appearance made me freeze in place. He didn't look right. He was charred, his skin clearly burnt black, and though he was at a good distance, I could see the shrinking crinkle around his neck and shoulders. I couldn't move. I wanted to so badly. That's when I really saw his eyes. Dark black centers surrounded by white, as if his eyelids were burned off. I heard my husband calling me, asking me something about my opinion, until I guess he noticed I didn't move or stop staring. I felt him step to my side and ask if everything was okay. All I could muster as I kept eye contact with the man was, "Can you see him?" I didn't want to look away, in case he moved and everyone then thought I was crazy. My husband looked, but he just said the forest is nice. We need to make sure the dogs don't wander off in there and get ticks. He didn't see him, only I could. I thought I was doing well, that I was better. My husband then grabbed my hand to get my attention, and I finally looked away and looked at our realtor. Confused, he looked at me with an awkward smile. I guess I looked too serious. I asked him what had happened in this area. He said he didn't know and asked me why. I told him I saw a man in the forest. I didn't include the details. I just wanted to know if anything happened. I watched him go through his folder and shake his head before telling me he didn't know. But since we were starting to like the home, he would check for us. It was an uneasy ride home. The burnt face of the man stuck in my head as my husband and his mother spoke about the last home's great features. A few hours later, we went to my in-laws' place for dinner. My husband asking me why I was so quiet if I liked the home so much. Sending my son to another room to play, I explained to him and his parents in detail what I saw. Maybe they all thought I was crazy, because his dad was quiet before getting up and going to another room. but he brought back a map. Pointing to it, he asked us if this was the area. My husband confirmed, and my father-in-law's face was stoic. He then explained that there was a reason that area was a new development. The government had just released the land because it had passed the allotted time of closure after an accident. He elaborated that when he was younger, he heard of a plane crash happening there where several people died. The main area where it landed was still closed off and owned by the government, but places where bodies and debris were found and cleaned up had slowly been released. Now my mother-in-law is really superstitious. It's probably where my husband gets it from, and she said we should forget that area. A few moments after dinner, we got a phone call from our realtor. He was apologizing profusely. He said that he didn't know that any deaths had occurred in that area, confirming that what my father-in-law had said was true. This story is both darkly humorous and also terrifying at the same time. So I got kicked out of my house when I was 15, and I had been homeless periodically. This was one of those times. It was cold and I didn't want to be sleeping outdoors, so I had to go through social services, and they put me into what's called emergency housing. The people who approved these standards of some of these places need to be fired yesterday. They sent me to one of the worst neighborhoods ever, into a house where I was the only female with 4 grown-ass men for housemates, and there was no one there supervising anything. Half of the house was made up of a burnt-out porch. There were both rats and roaches of monstrous proportions, and usually no heat or hot water. Me and one of the guys ended up sharing a room. I'll refer to him as Jay. One of our other housemates was a guy I never actually saw, and didn't know if he even lived there anymore or what. Another one was usually decent, but he drank so much every night that he forgot how to use keys, so he was usually found passed out on the floor outside of his door. And then there was a guy from the Caribbean, that I'm going to refer to as C, for both being from the Caribbean as well as being the crackhead this story is about. Now this dude was creepy as hell, and he had a lot of prostitute friends. They knew that our front door lock generally didn't work, so it wasn't uncommon to just run into some random hookers making grilled cheeses in the middle of the night. Me and Jay also liked to mess with C, because 1, we were stupid teenagers who didn't realize that crackheads can be dangerous, and 2, we were both assholes who didn't have much to do. We'd tell him to please stop lining his teeth up on the windowsill by the kitchen table when they fell out from said crack usage, because it's, not the most appetizing thing to look at when you're eating. So one night, after a new tooth was added, we decided that we would just turn everything in the kitchen upside down, and then wait for him to come in and pretend like it was perfectly normal. We spent a good 4 hours doing this. It was almost impressive. It worked too well, because he completely lost his shit after we kept telling him that the kitchen looked normal. What the hell are you talking about? Also, it should be noted that it was December and we didn't have heat again, but this dude is jittering around the house in his tighty-whities, sweating like a sprinkler. So C went into his room and he's cursing and slamming things around in there. Jay goes to go to the bathroom, and I hear C come tearing out, and then Jay comes running into the room and slams the door, looking absolutely terrified. He throws the chain lock on the door, and tells me we gotta move the beds and dresser against it, and that C has a sword or some shit. It was a machete, and that thing comes blade first through the shitty door, exactly like The Shining, but with a crackhead. So we're frantically trying to move our mattress against the door and the dresser, and we have no other way out besides this window. But we are going to have to go quietly as hell under his window, and run through the woods into the dark to get to the nearest payphone to call the cops. Luckily, C is still going at it on the door and making a ton of noise, so we were able to get past his window into the payphone. The cops were able to get into the house easily because the front door was still unlocked for the hookers to come in. C had had several outstanding warrants, so he ended up getting locked up for quite a long time. Jay was and is a complete piece of shit unrelated to this story. And after this happened, social services thought that maybe this wasn't the best housing arrangement for me, and I moved to a different location. I never heard anything else about C after that, as a lot of even worse things happened, and this event was put into the past. But for some reason, it popped into my head tonight. This happened about 4 years ago. I had made plans to meet a friend at his house in the early hours of a weekday afternoon. I'm one of those people who always shows up on time, if not 15 minutes early to things I've planned. But on this day, I was running late for whatever reason. Naturally, I was super stressed out about this, and was rushing to get in my car and start driving to my friend's house, so I could be there on time. I lived in Englewood, Colorado, a busy little suburb of Denver. The main highway that runs through Englewood is called Santa Fe, and it was easy to get to from my house. Just turn down a 2-lane road, wait at a stoplight, and you're on your way. Santa Fe has 3 lanes on each side, separated by a concrete divider in the middle. It's not a true highway, I guess, because it has the occasional stoplight. All of these details are important for context. It was a beautiful, sunny, early summer day. There wasn't a single cloud in the sky. Given that it was the middle of the week, there was almost no one on the road, much to my delight, because I was going to be late. I turned down the 2-lane road to get to Santa Fe, and immediately got stuck behind a lifted red pickup that was going 15 miles under the speed limit. I should also mention that I have a bit of road rage. This, combined with my hurry to get to my friend's house, and the fact that there was no one else on the road, caused me to make an impulsive decision. I illegally passed the truck by speeding around him in the suicide lane, so I could swing back around in front of him. As soon as I did this, he turned on his brights and started riding the ass of my tiny Subaru Impreza. I didn't think much of it, almost found it sort of comical. Much to my dismay, he was also turning left onto Santa Fe, and we both had to come to a stop together at the light. The whole time we waited for the light to change, he was pulled up alongside me in the double turn lane, trying to yell at me through my closed windows. I refused to make eye contact, and opted to stare hard at the light instead, begging it to change so I could speed away from this dude. It changed to green, and I've never shifted into first, second, and third so fast. My plan was to speed away from him as quickly as I could, but he followed alongside me, matching my speed, swerving violently, and yelling the entire time. I began to feel genuinely scared. We were on the highway in broad daylight, but there wasn't a single soul going south on Santa Fe with us that day. He began deliberately swerving into my lane, trying to hit my car with his. I switched lanes in a lame attempt to deter him, and ended up in the far left lane along the concrete divider. He took this as an opportunity to try and crush my vehicle against it with his truck. I slammed on my brakes and came to a dead stop, then darted into another lane and booked it while he tried to catch up. I was in the far right lane then, and he came up behind me and tried to run me off the road. I was in pure survival mode at this point, with adrenaline surging through my body, functioning on fear and instinct alone. To make matters worse, another light was coming up. I couldn't reach my phone, and there was still no one else in sight. Over and over, as I approached the light, I had to dodge his multiple attempts to trap me between the concrete divider and his truck, or to run me off the side of the road. When I finally arrived at the light, it was red. So fearing what he'd do if we were at a stop together again, I quickly made a U-turn onto the other side of the highway and gunned it down the next off-street I encountered, praying to gods I don't believe in that he wasn't able to follow me. If he'd tried, he must have lost me, because I didn't see him again for the rest of my drive. I looked for his truck every time I stepped out of my house for the rest of the time I lived in Englewood, and I'm glad to say I never saw him again. Hey guys and ladies, thanks for watching. Send your story or creepypasta to the email in the description. My merch, Patreon, Instagram, and Twitter are down there too. Anything you do to help support the channel is much appreciated. Likes and up. Also, I just started a Discord. I just created a server on Discord. If you're interested, the link to my Discord is in the description as well. Come hang out and bullshit and share memes and music and blah, blah, blah. So, be good to animals, even people. So.
Gel, snämar, bärksbus, rish.
What kind of car is that? I'm just waiting for this fucking plane from World War II to fucking pass. Jesus.